honest if we're being honest.
Hi, I am Dan Shike at Tone and Volume Mastering in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm going to show you a run-through of James Fortune's Never Let Me Down single. Alright, what we see here is sort of my standard setup. I import the unmastered mix into a track labeled Mixes, and I put a copy of it just below on a reference track. So I've got access to the unmastered mix on a soloable track right away with the master track going through my outboard gear. So I load the song up into this track, and in preparation for going into the outboard gear, I lower it a little bit because there's kind of a sweet spot for where the analog gear sets. So once I get the song loaded in, I hit play, see how the levels are hitting everything, and I've already had this song in, so I kind of know that it's going to end up at about -10. That's pretty standard for a song that comes in mixed this hot. You can see I kind of start off at a fairly comparable level to what was sent in this case. So once I do that and I got it set so that I can go back and forth between the two, I start to do my tone adjustment. I've got a standard set of things that I kind of have for my starting template on my mix playback before it goes out to the analog gear. Here I've got a Millennium Media NSEQ2 from Plugin Alliance and Brainworks, doing just a little skosh, a 1 dB bump at 21K for some shine, a little bit of 8K-ish presence, a little bit of 700 or 800 hertz for some thickness in the mid-range, and a little bump at 56 hertz, because everybody loves a little bump at 56 hertz, right? After that, I'm going through an SPL iron compressor, again, from Plugin Alliance, and it's doing just next to nothing. It's mostly just a Mojo control box. You can see from the meters here, the loudest parts of the song, it isn't really even moving. But you can hear, like, there's a weight to it. And it's not just a level adjustment, it has a thickness to the mid-range that I really like. So I use that on a lot of things. And usually if I can see the needle moving, I back it off a little bit. I don't really use this for compression much, just for sounding cool. After that, goes through doing nothing today is the Acoustica Audio Scarlett 4. I use this a lot for tone carving. This one didn't need any tone carving. And then a wee bit on the U80 Fatso Senior. Again, you'll see it's not really doing anything actively, no compression, no warmth, not even touching the 0 VU. It just does a little bit of rolling off of the tiniest bit of transients and fattens up the low mid-range, and it just sounds great. There's a little bit of volume decrease in it, so it's kind of hard to do an A/B with that today, but trust me, it sounds good. I like it and I use it a lot. So after going through this in-the-box stuff, this is sent out to the Crane Song Head Quantum Digital to Analog Converter, where I have it going through Rupert Neve Design's Master Bus processor, getting a little bit of the blue silk because I love the blue silk and the little bit of harmonic distortion that it adds. I'm not hitting it very hard. It's a pretty mild process the way that I'm going through the box, but it adds some nice warmth and character to it. And after that, I'm going through a Manley Massive Passive, just doing a little bit of a bump on the low end. Once I figure that stuff out, as I'm listening to the project through the outboard gear and a limiter and the workstation here in Sequoia, I'm using newfangled Elevate mastering. I guess it's not really a mastering per se, it's just a limiter, but it's a limiter with a multi-band filter system. You can see each one of these is a separate byte of the audio frequency, and you can see what it's doing to each portion, and it's just little bits here and there. You can see Not much limiting going on, just a dB and a half or two, maybe 3 once in a while. Since this mix came in pretty hot, it doesn't need a whole lot of additional limiting. So it gets just a little hat put on it to catch the dynamics and add a little fatness. I'm also using the transient enhancement of this plugin. Gives just a little bit of a bump there, you can see on the kick drum. A little bit of thickness, and it gives a little bit of pop on the snare here at 3 or 4K, and a little bit of the top on the snare there. Very subtle. If I turn it off, you can hear that it's different on an AB. You may not hear it if you didn't have the AB set up, but that's part of the flavor that you get when I do a song. So I listen through it, get a general sound happy, and then I will record the whole song through. And that works better when I push the record button. So as I'm recording, I'm listening down to the whole song without distraction, listening for clicks and pops. And I'm thinking about what next needs to be done in the processing. What I've done with the in-the-box processing and the outboard usually gets me 80 to 90% of the way there. And then once I get it recorded, I listen for clicks and pops and de-essing. And then I may put a little bit of EQ on to just find that last little bit as I'm moving back and forth between loud and quiet listening. If I'm doing a lot of songs, there may be more variance from song to song as to individual EQ, but this one we did as a single, so it kind of got a standalone treatment. So I'll spare us the rest of recording this, and I will bring what I recorded initially back over into the project so we can pretend that that was recorded all the way through. And I've got the song here as it was just recorded. After listening to it, I thought it needed a little bit more vocal presence and a little bit of high-end zip. So I put a DMG Equilibrium EQ on, where I've got, it looks like 4.2 dB. It sounds like a lot, but this is a Pultec emulation, and it doesn't sound like nearly as many dBs as it said. So I don't go cranking 4 dB at top end on much of anything ever, and I didn't do that here. I've got quarter of a dB at 8.7K and a really, really wide Q, so it's more of a presence overall tone. It gets down into the vocal a little bit. We've got a slight bump at 1.5K and a slight bump at 800. This is vocal presence. This is going to be vocal body. And the low end was quite dialed between the massive passive and the in-the-box processing here, so I didn't even do any low end boosting there. Once I get this recorded, I'll go back and forth between the unmastered and the mastered, and it's like, do I like it? Is it better? Is there anything in the unmastered that has character that the mastered doesn't? Is there something that I want to have carry through? So there's a lot of back and forth. If I hear, a click or a pop, I'll use this as a reference to check, is that something that happened in a computer glitch in the recording or in the power? So having this immediately available reference of the same song to go back and forth to is very valuable. So once I do that, I do the top and tail. This song has a very clean beginning, but I always do a 220 millisecond gap before the audio starts so that there's time to push play and then hear music and not have the music start the second you push play. The difference between that wait and it's just nicer to have a brief moment there. And for CD players and some file players, it's good to have a little bit of time before the first sound comes through, because depending on what player it is that you're using, some of them take a second to get the audio streaming. Computers, you can never trust them. So I do that little cleanup at the front. If there's background hiss or any sort of room noise, that gets cleaned off, so we've got a nice clean entrance. And then to the end, I do the fade out. A lot of times a mix will come, as you can see here, with a very, very extended fade time, and nobody really needs to hear what turns out to be an 8-second fade when the song is done and there's just delays trailing off over the end. So I button up the very end of the song. If you want to hear, that's pretty long. So we trim it out, get it out of there a little faster. Usually try to not fade much on the vocal. I want to get that fade to happen after the last of the vocal is said, unless it's, a vamp out to the end of a song or something. So this song didn't have any clicks and pops. It was a John Yosh mix, and it came in sounding great. So it didn't need a whole lot of treatment. Mostly just tone control and slight adjustment and an enhancement. If this were an album situation where it later turned out to be, you can see that there are the rest of the songs here. They ended up getting individual treatment and volume adjustments. So this one was mixed louder than that one. So you can see that that one gets a little quieter send out to the analog gear than that one. And part of the rest of the process was matching up the volume levels from song to song for the rest of the EP. And that's James Fortune, Never Let Me Down, mastering walkthrough.